And welcome back to another week of creating the new normal, leadership in a post-pandemic world. This is Claire and Ben. And this week we want to talk to you about sprint versus marathon mentality. And I think that this is something as leaders we really need to be looking at. Are we sprint? Are we constantly in sprint mode? Or are we taking a look and sit there and say, okay, there's certain things that we need to be sprinting, and most things we got to be in marathon mode. And I want to dive into that. So, Claire, I want your initial thoughts on this, and then we can dive into this together.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a great topic. It's such an important topic. You know, we have been throughout this conversation series emphasizing that smart leaders and smart companies are keeping one eye on crisis mode, because we cannot overlook, underestimate this common global enemy of COVID-19. But we also have to maintain that second eye on the horizon and play for the longer game, which is so fitting for your analogy of the marathon mentality. But you already have raised a good point that it's not an either or, it's not a black or white situation. There are a lot of things in leadership, in running a company, in going beyond just keeping the lights on, that has to do with sprints, right? There are certain things that speak to the agility of a company. So companies need to be agile. They need to be able to make decisions quickly, but not hastily, and always with that eye toward the long game. So I think this is such an important topic for us to dive into.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because it's not just today. It's moving forward for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, or beyond the next 100 years. We're always going to have crisis. It may not be a worldwide crisis. It may be a crisis within the organization. It could be something that just happened today, but if we're constantly living in crisis mode, if we're constantly living in sprint mode, if we're constantly sitting there going, okay, we're going to be the duck where, we look calm on the very top, but we're, paddling like mad underneath, that really creates a horrible place for companies to be mentally, and it stresses people out. It absolutely stresses people out if people are constantly saying, oh my God, I got to do this, and then I got to do this, and I got to do this. And they're always sitting there going, when am I going to be able to catch my breath? We're always running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I mean, I remember, years ago being in the ad agency business, and everything was a sprint. Everything was a crisis. Everything was last minute. Everything was all-nighters, to make an 8 o'clock in the morning presentation, and you're printing something up on the color printer at 5 o'clock in the morning and binding it up and rushing to a client's office at 8 a.m., hoping to God there's no spelling mistakes, hoping to God you have everything. And then the next day you started up and you got up and you did it all over again.
Yep.
And what does that do? That creates ulcers. That creates unnecessary stress. It creates an environment where, yeah, you do get those creative juices going, but you also get a lot of burnout.
Yeah,
you get an enormous amount of burnout, and that's burnout from the staff, it's burnout from the leaders, it's burnout from senior management, where you're always sitting there going in sprint mode, always going in 1,000,000 miles an hour, just trying to catch up. And I think that if we set our eyes on the horizon and say, okay, where are we going? Where do we want to be? Where do we want to be in 5 years from now? Where do we want to be in 10 years from now? Where do we want to be in 20 years from now? And we know that's going to change. We all know it's going to change. Nobody has got the perfect crystal ball. No one's got the understanding that, we're going to make a 5-year plan, and in 5 years plan, things are going to go exactly to plan. It's not. Things are going to hit you. You're going to have to go into crisis mode. You're going to have to go into sprint mode every once in a while. You're going to have to take 3 steps back. You're going to have to punt. You're going to have, employee changes, customer changes, whatever. Things happen. But if we have an eye on the goal, if we keep an eye on the horizon, if we're always looking out saying, this is where we want to go, you start looking at things with a different vision, with a different viewpoint. And I think leaders need to start thinking that way. Instead of managing the crisis in the situation, sit there saying, you know what, people, we trust you to get stuff done. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. we need to start running the business with this viewpoint in mind, with going long term. What's our vision for this customer for the next 5 or 10 years, let alone what's the customer vision with this customer for the next 30 days? And that's the mentality shift that I think we need to start thinking about for customers if we're going to be successful. Forget whether it's COVID-19, forget whether it's this crisis or whatever, whether we're going to be successful as corporations moving forward.
Oh, that's so true. And there is such a key difference between agility and firefighting, right? And there's a difference between strategic crisis management versus haphazard management by chaos. We talked about this on one of the previous episodes, how many leaders we know who thrive in chaos. They thrive when there are 100 spinning plates and there's all this ambiguity and uncertainty. And to your point, business will always have ambiguity. But the difference is, and things will change. You can have a very long-term view. You can have a strategic plan and a roadmap to get there, but there will always be the need for course corrections. And the companies that have a clearer eye toward where they want to get to, not end up, but strive toward, they will have a much easier time of adjusting to those bumps in the road or those major hills like we're going through with COVID-19. And the other thing you talk about is burnout. Leaders may thrive in chaos, but they constantly have to be mindful of the impact that they have on their people, right? And they need to be aspiring, all of us as leaders need to be aspiring to making as positive and forward-moving impact as we can on the people that we lead and the people who follow us. But those who manage by chaos as their normal standard operating procedure, their normal standard playbook, you're right, the burnout risk is so high, and you're sending a message that not that you're agile or that you're flexible or that you're spontaneous, but that you don't know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because it's that chaos that leads to culture burnout. It's if everybody in the office is looking at you going, what are you doing? Like, why didn't you perceive this? Why weren't you thinking 5 steps ahead? Why are we in this situation again?
Right.
Why would your team trust you? Why would your team pick up their weapons and run into the fire with you if every single time they're picking up their weapons, they're running right into another fire? They'll go into the fire once, they'll go into the fire twice. They might even go to the fire 3 times if it's necessary. But if they trust the person that's leading them to sit there and say, okay, every time we get up, we're not running into another fire, because you get totally and absolutely burned out if you're just living in a constant state of chaos. If you as an employee are constantly saying, okay, where are we going now? We made this plan, we said we were going in this direction, and then all of a sudden we're moving over here, and then we're moving over here, and then we're moving over here. And how does that help you? I mean, it leads to employees sitting there going, forget it, I'm done. Yep. I'm done, I'm going somewhere else. And every employee that leaves you costs you $100,000 to replace. Yeah. So why would you want to lead through chaos? Why would you want to constantly be in sprint mode and not building the trust of the people, not giving them the vision and the direction and the leadership that they deserve so that they can trust you? So when the sprint needs to happen, they're sitting there saying, okay, this is an exception. This is not a rule. This is okay. The stuff has hit the fan. We need to take care of it. All hands on deck. Let's go. We need to take care of this. You know what? Something unexpected happened. You know what? It's nobody's fault. Let's go. Is a completely different thought process. Oh my God, here we go again.
That's right.
And I think that we need to sit there as leadership and say, what is the message that's going on in everybody's mind when we, all of a sudden hit the panic button?
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I have to laugh because I know a lot of leaders who thrive in chaos, and they wear that proudly, oh, I manage by chaos. That's how I go. And their justification for it is, well, because we're an entrepreneurial culture, right? Entrepreneurial doesn't mean you're making it up as you go. Entrepreneurial, yes, does mean you are agile. Maybe you're not as weighed down by bureaucracy, but it doesn't mean you don't have a plan. Entrepreneurial should mean, to your point, yeah, I know where I want us to go, and we're not going to take the typical corporate path that's weighed down by a lot of approval gates, but we still have a master plan, right? And I'm reminded of, we had this great conversation last week on our live episode about the customer experience. And one of the things that we really talked about was the businesses and the brands that rise above everyone else, because everyone makes mistakes, are the companies and the entities that know how to recover, right? And so, your analogy of going in and fighting a fire repeatedly, if they're different fires for different reasons, that's one thing. And if you give people the tools to fight that fire head on versus, by blind luck, they make it through alive, it's then incumbent upon good companies and good leaders to sit there after the dust has settled, right? After the smoke has cleared, to say, okay, how are we going to recover from this? What will we learn from this? How will we get stronger? And what will we put in place, both from a technical infrastructure standpoint and from a learning organization standpoint, to ensure that we never repeat the same mistakes?
Yeah, because if you're doing the same thing over and over again, that's the definition of insanity. I mean, it is people managed by crisis, but they lead people into the future. And that management by crisis, as you said, it's without a plan. It's by the seat of your pants. It's, oh my God, we woke up this morning and the phone rang. My entire world has to change. But does it? Does that, somebody else's sense of panic, make your sense of reality that much stronger? Do you have to jump every time somebody screams?
Right.
Do you have to be there and sit there and go, oh my God, the phone rang, this is a 911 for somebody else, so it becomes a 911 for me, therefore it becomes 911 for my people. Well, wait a second here. Let's sit down and talk about it. The first thing leaders need to say is, when they pick up the phone, is, how much of a 911 is this? Really? How many things in our life are truly life and death? How many things are truly 911? Now, there absolutely are. There are things, perfect example, a number of years ago, I'm sitting in Hawaii and I'm actually driving up Haleakala. I'm in Maui and I'm driving up the mountain and my phone rings. And it's a client. And they say, where are you? I said, you don't really want to know. And they said, no, seriously, where are you? I said, before I answer this, you need to realize my wife and my 6-year-old kid are in the car. And he says, okay. I says, I'm on Maui. I'm up, at 8,000 feet on my way up to Haleakala. How can I help you? And you hear this blank at the side of the other end of the phone. I go, what's wrong? Hang on, let me pull over. So I pulled over, had a quick conversation with this guy. There was a rules and regulation change that meant that he needed to get 250,000 pieces of direct mail out to his clients by January 5th. This is over Christmas. Okay? I said, look, I'm going up. I said, it's early in the morning here. We're heading up the mountain. I'll be back in 2 hours. In 2 hours and 5 minutes, I will be on the phone with you and we will figure this out. And we did. And it wasn't cheap, but we got it done and we pulled a team together and we organized it. But the reason I was able to pull a team together over Christmas to not only design this thing, but to print the envelopes, to get it into the direct mail, to get it, out to the customers in time, it was because I had built up a level of trust, not only with the customer, but with the sub-trades that I use to be able to make this thing happen. And we need to sit there and say, what is the issue? What is the problem? When does this need to be done? Is this like oh my God, if you don't stop the car and if you don't turn around right now and we deal with this right now, my life is going to come to an end? Or can I call you in 2 hours?
Yeah. Boy, there's
Can I have some time to think about this,
yeah.
figure out what I need to do, and then give you a call? And that goes inside the company, it goes outside the company. And that's the mentality that we need to have to be able to assess, are we going into sprint mode? Or is this just another mile on the marathon that we just need to figure out how to get over that hill?
Yeah. There's wow, there's so much to unpack in that story. And the one of them is, are we sprinting just because that is our muscle memory, right? That is our habit, is not to stop and say, is this truly something we need to sprint toward, or is this something we can take a little bit more time with, right? And don't get me started about the ubiquitous cell phone. I mean, kudos to Hawaii having such great cell signal when you're halfway up a mountain, at 8,000 feet. But that's the other thing about, we are never truly disconnected from our customers, from our business. And there's a positive to that and there's a negative to that, right? That, the negative, of course, is you can never fully let go and sort of, get that perspective and work on your own, sanity and your own burnout prevention program, right? But the good side of that is that there is that connection, and your client knows that they can rely on you. And, one of the things in our business, not just as leaders, but as guides to leadership, and it's a lesson for business leaders as well, is to be a voice of reason amidst the chaos, not be the cause of or the furtherance of that chaos. So in that example where the client contacted you and said, oh my God, the world's on fire, you had the wherewithal to say, let's evaluate, is this a 5-alarm fire, or is this contained within, a dustbin that we can kind of put a lid on, right? And providing that voice of calm, even though it did turn out to be, a little bit of a crisis that you had to manage through, you were able to get him to exhale. And I think that's part of the job of any good leader, is to, not just give their employees space to breathe and figure things out on their own and come up with great ideas and new ways of doing things that perhaps they haven't thought about, but also give them the peace of mind to exhale. You talked about this. Why is it that every time we have to go down to the wire and we're working all-nighters and all of that? And it's sort of like, why do women get bigger and bigger purses? Why do we constantly, move into homes that have more and more closet space? And the first thing we say is, I could never possibly fill that space.
We
Oh
always
yeah,
fill the fishbowl.
hold my beer, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we expand to fit the space that we are provided, and that is just as true when it comes to time, right? So if we're given 27 days to put together a proposal or a marketing brochure or a strategic plan, we take 26 and a half days and we go, right up until the FedEx deadline or the delivery deadline, right? Because we think, well, we've been given this time, we should fill this time. And that's a sprinting mentality versus a marathon mentality that says, where do we want to be at day 27? What is the image we want to present? What is the message we want to deliver through this plan, this proposal, this brochure, this event, what have you, right? And use that as your guidance. Use that as your GPS to say, yes, there will be gates. And some of the gates we're going to need to sprint between. But others we are going to take measured steps. And if you are doing this the right way and you're playing the long game, you're going to be taking more measured steps and reevaluating and recovering when necessary than you are sprinting from gate to gate.
And you know what? I think that's a phenomenal place to leave this, because we need to be thinking about that. We need to be thinking that, we need to look at the world in a marathon mentality. We need to give our employees the opportunity to look at the world in a marathon mentality, that not everything is a crisis, that everything and anything can be planned out. And if it can't be planned out in the long term, it can be planned out in the short term. And we still, even in the crisis mode, even in that sprint mentality, we need to start thinking about, okay, what's the end goal? What's the end game? What are we trying to achieve? What are we really trying to achieve? It's not just getting this proposal out the door. It's what getting this proposal out the door is going to do. Or by spending all night doing this, how does this further not only the company objectives, how do we take care of our customer, and what is this going to do for the team? And that's where leaders need to be thinking about is getting behind them. We're going to go back to this time and time again. It's the why. It's not the what, it's not the how, it's the why.
That's right.
So go ahead.
No, I just said, well said. I think that's 100% right.
Perfect. So let's leave it there. This has been Claire and Ben. This is Creating the New Normal, Leadership in a Post-Pandemic World. Stay tuned next week. We got another episode coming to you. Thanks a lot.
See ya.